Hi there. If you're an aspiring C suite leader or a CEO or board member looking to groom one, this video is for you. Over the past several decades, I've had the good fortune and honor of working with high potential leaders who were right on the edge of something bigger. They were strong functional leaders. Some ran business units with P&L responsibilities. Others led critical functions, finance, strategy, operations, technology, sales. They were smart, driven, and proven, and yet they hadn't quite crossed the line into enterprise level leadership. And that threshold is not about title, it's not about compensation, and it's not even about experience. It's about a mental shift. In past videos, we've talked about what makes an effective executive team. Today, I want to talk about what it really takes to develop leaders to step into that room and contribute at the highest level. The first shift is this: a high potential leader must stop seeing themselves as the head of a function and start seeing themselves as a steward of the enterprise. That sounds simple, and it's not. Most rising leaders have built their careers by excelling in one domain. They prove themselves over and over in marketing and finance and operations and product, and they were rewarded for driving their KPIs. They were also rewarded for optimizing their silo. But C level leadership demands something different. It requires what I call the balcony view, the ability to step above the day to day gravitational pull and see the entire system, how functions interrelate, where priorities compete, where friction is natural, where trade offs must be made, where enterprise value is truly created. Without that systems perspective, leaders remain trapped in functional excellence, but never graduate to enterprise leadership. And here's the reality: most leaders do not develop this instinctively. This must be intentionally groomed. This shift does not happen by accident. A CEO, or at a minimum, an executive sponsor, must actively develop high potential leaders and invest in their development. That means giving them exposure beyond their silo, assigning cross enterprise initiatives, including them in strategic discussions, inviting them into board level thinking, and ideally pairing them with a mentor or a coach who can structure the growth process through stakeholder interviews, behavioral feedback, and discipline reflection. Because this development requires something rare in senior leadership: time to think. Leaders stepping toward the C suite must regularly ask themselves, if I were CEO, what would matter most right now? What would increase enterprise value across all the stakeholders? How must the functions be orchestrated to achieve that? What relationships do I need to cultivate to become a catalyst for enterprise success, not just my department success? And what must shift in how I communicate and show up? That reflection must happen weekly, sometimes daily. And without deliberate perspective taking, leaders default to the urgency of the quarterly KPIs, the thing that's right in front of them, the firefighting. Well, enterprise leadership requires lifting your gaze. So let's talk about something called executive presence. This term gets thrown around constantly, and most definitions are superficial, vague. They're about clothing or polish or speaking cadence, and that's not what I mean. Executive presence at the C level is range. The higher you rise, the broader your communication range must become, and the higher quality of the working relationships that you have. For example, a CEO needs to speak to investors focused on capital allocation, finance leaders focused on margin, sales leaders focused on revenue velocity, and employees who are focused on where are we going and is my job secure, customers seeking reassurance, and the board seeking strategic clarity. So each stakeholder listens through a different filter. Executive presence is the ability to adapt your communication while remaining anchored in a clear thesis about the business. It's also about relationship fluency. Nothing great can happen unless the C level leader has strong and resilient relationships that are required to work together towards goals, to work through those competing priorities that are so difficult, to improve the ability of the executive team to lead powerfully and achieve great things. Executive leaders at the C suite have to be able to be focused on building a stronger team. It's not just the province of the CEO. So that ownership is important. Here's an example. I recently worked with the head of corporate development in a high growth technology company. Impressive resume, investment banking pedigree, technically brilliant, but the executive team was founder led and relatively inexperienced in high stakes M&A. My client initially saw their role as the deal engineer, model the transaction, structure the deal, advise the team like they had when they were at the investment bank. But that mindset was too narrow once they were really in the inside game within the executive team. They needed to evolve into something more powerful. to be an enterprise catalyst. That meant educating the executive team in deal literacy, developing the relationships individually to build trust in high stakes matters like M&A, elevating the team's ability to evaluate risk, helping them to think strategically about enterprise value, and moving fluidly between partner, strategist, and coach in their own role. They had to shift from being the smartest deal person in the room to being the leader who raised the capability of the entire room. That shift ultimately supported the company's largest acquisition, one that expanded them internationally and solidified their leadership position on the market. That's executive presence, not ego, not polish. It was real impact. The most respected senior leaders attract top talent, they develop successors, they create esprit de corps, and they elevate morale in hard times and deliver results through others. I once worked with a senior executive at Charles Schwab who embodied this. She was gracious, influential, results driven, and powerful. But what made her powerful was this: everyone knew her team was exceptional, one of the best in the organization, and they loved working for her. That kind of leader becomes indispensable. As leadership experts Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner have said, leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. Who wants to struggle? That's enterprise power if you can do that. Finally, character matters: integrity, humility, balance, self awareness. We've all seen ego driven leaders leave wreckage behind them. In the long run, they underperform their potential. The strongest leaders, however, learn from personal setbacks, from crises, from disappointment. They metabolize feedback. As Ken Blanchard said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. Great leaders are not fragile, they are reflective. They grow deeper over time. Here's a closing story on human motivation. I recently spoke with an M&A advisor who several years prior had purchased a struggling company with high turnover and low morale. Instead of cutting costs, he invested in people. He actually increased wages. He provided a more clear purpose to the work and really provided respect that had been missing under the prior ownership. He learned when he was in the Air Force that people perform better when they feel valued. You know what happened? Productivity rose, efficiency improved, enterprise value increased, and discretionary effort unlocked that value. That's leadership. So, in closing, I want to mention that developing C level leaders is not about polish, it's about expanding perspective, increasing range, developing relationships, and strengthening character, and building high achieving teams that elevate enterprise value. My purpose is to help leaders make that shift, to build great teams that achieve worthy things and inspire others to do the same. Because when leaders grow at that level, organizations achieve things that keep us moving forward and give people a sense of purpose and gratitude for being part of an organization where they matter. If this sparked something for you, please like this video, subscribe to our High Achieving Teams Playbook channel, and share it with a leader who might be facing a similar challenge. Then try something of your own this week. Pause and ask yourself, if I were CEO, what would matter most right now? Have a conversation from that perspective with key stakeholders in your organization. Step onto the balcony before diving back into the details. That's how C-suite leaders are really developed, one mindset shift at a time. Lead on, and see you next week. Thanks for listening.